Okay, boys. So, pretty underwhelming stream yesterday for the expansion draft, partly because we knew all the picks, but also because we were expecting a lot of side deals to be done by Seattle and a lot of trades. And unfortunately, none of them happened. And we found out that the NHL and NHL teams would actually be releasing this information at 1 p.m. Eastern today, which is why we were all waiting and anticipating for the 1 p.m. deadline to arrive so we could start discovering some of these trades. Now, there have been two other trades that have happened so far, including Arizona players or past players slash future players. Arizona's getting Shane Gothisbehere, and I believe Calgary is getting Pitlick. But when details come out for that, we're going to have a separate video that's going to be released as soon as we get the details for that video out. But this is not what we're talking about right now, because Carolina has just done goofed. They have messed up beyond belief. I can't even comprehend what their thought process was. You have like a 24-year-old goaltender who just got third in Calder voting, was outstanding in the playoffs, had a great year this year for you, and you have all three of your goalies hitting unrestricted free agency. And obviously, I know Nedeljkovic was asking for a lot of money, and based on how arbitration was going, Carolina might have had to pay him a lot of money. But he's a 24, 25-year-old stud goaltender who can give you 10 years of great to elite goaltending. You don't give that away just because you don't want to pay him. And I mean, the thing is, if you traded Ned and you got back a player who's got a goaltender who's established, who has term on his contract, who can help you win now, who can give you Ned production for the next 4 years, maybe 4 or 5 years, while you're trying to compete for a cup with this current core, and you don't have to pay him maybe 4.5, 5 million like Nedeljkovic might get. Fine, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Jonathan Bernier has been sneakily a decent player. And before I go any further, this is the full trade. The Carolina Hurricanes trade goaltender Nedeljkovic to the Detroit Red Wings in exchange for the rights to unrestricted free agent Jonathan Bernier and a third-round pick. So back now to my point about Bernier, he's been a solid goaltender. He was maligned a lot in Toronto because he had really big lowlights, and that team wasn't winning a lot with him there. And these were the years after 2013 when Toronto fans thought and had expectations that maybe the team could build on what they did that year and become, perennial playoff teams, and they weren't, which is why looking back, at the time, people I think were a bit too harsh on Bernier because he's usually put up pretty decent numbers, and the last 2 years in Detroit as well, he's played well. Especially 2 years ago on a Detroit team that really didn't know how to play defense at all, he put up very respectable numbers. And this year, even though Detroit didn't do that great, he had like a 914 save percentage, and he did well for them. And so I do think that he's not a bad piece to get in general, but if he's the main player in a trade for your 25 year old stud rookie goaltender, I just feel like Carolina sold way too low. Like way, way, way too low. Goalies, elite goalies or young goalies that have a lot of potential come at a premium. You will never see Philadelphia trading Carter Hart. You will never see Vancouver trade Thatcher Demko. You'll never see New Jersey will never move Mackenzie Blackwood unless these guys give you a reason to give up on them, right? And nothing Nedeljkovic has done this past season has suggested that he's not worth the money that he's asking for. Sure, if you're Carolina, you don't want to offer him that much money because you want to keep the team around him and you want to be able to re-sign players and improve the team. But Bernie is an unrestricted free agent. You're not even getting a guy with term left on his contract, right? By getting a guy like Bernier, you're basically saying we're expecting Bernier to ask for about 3 million because that's what Bernier is going to get. He got 3.5, I believe, with Detroit, or around 3 million with Detroit, and he had a really good 2 years with Detroit on a really bad team, and he's kind of rebuilt his brand and his reputation. And in an unrestricted free agent market where a lot of teams are going to be needing goalies, like Edmonton could be looking for a backup, Nashville could be looking for a backup now that Pecorine is retired, Toronto is looking for a backup if he's thinking about going there, and then Carolina obviously has two goalie holes that they need to fill, and Arizona needs a backup if they don't bring back Antti Raanta. So there's a lot of goaltending holes, and Jonathan Bernier is one of the better goaltenders that are available in free agency this year. So he might be asking for a raise too. And then nothing indicates from what we've seen so far that Carolina already has spoken to Bernier and already has a deal. Because if they do, this is probably a little bit better. If you get Bernier for like 3 or 4 years at like $2.5 or $3 million, that's perfectly fine. But if you're gonna if news comes out that either A, Bernier leaves in free agency, or B, Bernier gets re-signed in Carolina, but he gets like a 3-year 4 or a 3-year 3.85, then what was the point of trading Nedeljkovic? Because Nedeljkovic wasn't going to get over $5 million. So was saving $1.2 million to $1 million really worth giving up on a 24-year-old goalie who's playing the best hockey of his life and is going to be entering his prime for a goalie in Bernier who I believe is like 32, who's near the end of his prime? It just doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. And the third round pick is nice, but I mean, it's a third round pick, right? Like, if you ask any team, if you trade a third round pick and an expiring contract for a guy you're probably not bringing back, and you can get a future potential franchise goalie who's only 24 years old, but you just have to pay him a bit of money, 32 now. Well, actually, I can't say 32 because Carolina clearly didn't want to, but 31 out of 31 NHL teams would say, sign me up for that deal. I'll do that. Because in the grand scheme of things, yes, a third round pick could become something. But honestly, even in the first round, a lot of the times NHL draft picks are dart throws because it's not just about the individual talent that you get at that spot, it's how you develop that talent. Because a lot of these prospects, they're early development for 1 to 3 years before they even come to the AHL and are under the direct influence and development of the NHL team that drafted them. They're playing overseas. They're playing in the KHL. They're playing in the MHL. They're playing in the SHL. Alaskan, I think that's the Finnish league, right? Or OHL or CHL. These guys, they're getting coached by people that aren't related to the organization, and so much can go wrong in just a span of 2 to 3 years before they even reach the AHL/NHL level. And so you're throwing Carolina is taking Bernier, hoping that he will re-sign and he can be their stopgap starter for the next 2 to 3 seasons, and that somehow they'll be able to recoup value and find another young goalie like Nedeljkovic in the draft, which is something that I'm not a huge fan of because for a team, especially that's trying to win, why would you give up a known commodity for a chance? Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. Carolina is banking that their scouting department will be able to find another Alex Nedeljkovic. But are they going to be able to find that in time to compete with this current core? Because if not, then are you really maximizing this team, right? What can you do with $1 million to drastically upgrade your team? And is that upgrade worth down? Because I believe Nedeljkovic down to Bernier is a downgrade. And especially after next season, 2 years from now, Bernier is not going to be what he was in Detroit the last 2 seasons. And it's definitely very interesting. And I think what it really boils down to is Carolina has been sneakily one of the more frugal ownerships in the NHL. If you look at the contracts that they've signed, there's not a lot of guys making huge money. And that's why when you look at a guy like Dougie Hamilton, he's as good as gone from Carolina. Because Carolina was never going to pony up the money in the first place, I think, to be able to sign Dougie Hamilton. And it just shows that they don't hold a premium at preserving talent if it costs them money and ownership isn't willing to pay that money. Like, you look at their forwards, it's like they have Neo Niederreiter who's making like less than $6 million. They have Jordan Staal who's making less than $5 million. They have Teravainen, who's making like 5.5, right? You look at a lot of their top 6 guys, and a lot Trocheck's making like 5 million, right? You look at those guys, and it's kind of like a theme. This team doesn't pay top of the end talent. The first guy that they've really paid top of the line money to has been Sebastian Aho. You look at the past; they didn't want to pay Jeff Skinner, which in hindsight, probably a good move. They paid Alexander Semin, but then they didn't want to pay Alexander Semin, and I think they bought him out or they traded him, right? And you look at like all of the previous talent, I guess, and none of the players on that roster, besides Sebastian Aho, I think make over like $6 million a year, and that's crazy to me, right? Especially when you have a Norris candidate level defenseman, Dougie Hamilton. You're not willing to pony up what $8.5 million and $9 million for him. I mean, and I guess it's not our place to judge Carolina management, but when it comes to a position as important as goaltending, and considering how rare it is to find goaltending prospects that pan out and that play at an elite level in the NHL, it's just weird that they would give away a guy like this for basically nothing. Um, and even though Carolina does have a great development staff and they have a great prospect pool, I feel like especially with goalies, sometimes it doesn't even matter how good your drafting is because goalies are so hit or miss. I think especially like in terms of first round goalies, I think in like the last 10 years, the odds have really been like 60-40 or almost 50-50 in terms of what goalies pan out and what goalies don't. Um, so I mean, this trade doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't know, but you guys let us know what you think, and watch out for our other videos that will be coming out later today about other trades, and we're gonna do our best to keep you guys updated. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.